Welcome to Think Big with Dan and Qasim. Join hosts Dan Melnick and Qasim Masood as they explore big ideas, limitless possibilities, and engage with visionaries, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders who dare to dream big, get inspired, motivated, and find practical tips for personal growth. Think big, dream bigger, and ignite your potential.
All right, welcome to Think Big with Dan and Qasim. And if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, tell us where you live and what you do for a living.
Right on. So I am Carl Bonnett. I am the founder and medical director for Klarisana. So we are a healthcare organization, operates 5 ketamine clinics in Texas and Colorado.
Awesome. So can you just tell our audience more, how you got the idea to start this business and also what a ketamine clinic is? I think that, many people don't know.
Yeah, sure. So the idea was kind of a process. I'm an emergency physician by training, and I was in the Army National Guard for 20 years. I got deployed a few times to Iraq and Afghanistan as part of all that mess. But so it was really the veteran suicide rate is what kind of got me started on this. I was working for a while for the VA here in Denver, and I just kind of saw how the veterans were basically put on this concoction of medications that turned them into zombies. They're put on antidepressant, usually benzodiazepine, narcotic, and Seroquel, which is an antipsychotic. And there was one night where a woman brought in her husband, this gentleman who's a former Marine who served in Iraq, and she was just crying and carrying on, saying that this is not my husband, this is not who I married. I mean, I want my husband back. And this guy, when you hear his story, he and his best friend grew up together, went to high school together, had their first beer together, et cetera, et cetera. They joined the Marines together, and my patient that night got to watch his friend die right in front of him in Fallujah in Iraq. So, and of course, the VA put him on the same concoction of medications that don't change the underlying symptomatology. They just sort of mask it and turn you into a zombie. So I just got really frustrated with that. I really and was thinking like, man, there's something else that might work to help people? And then a buddy of mine showed me a study that actually was published by the Army in 2008, where they found that burned service members who received ketamine in order to anesthetize them to clean their wounds had far less PTSD symptoms than those who got other sedatives. So I got the bright idea to open the first ketamine clinic. So that was back in 2015 when I opened that down in San Antonio. And I guess just to answer your other question, so as far as what is ketamine, so ketamine falls sort of under the umbrella of psychedelic medicine, which I know can raise a lot of eyebrows initially when you first hear it. You're like, well, this is some 1960s stuff and whatever. But basically, it's the idea of leveraging a non-ordinary state of consciousness to change the way you see the world, to change your paradigm. So ketamine historically, it's an anesthetic agent. It's been around since 1970, FDA approved. We use it in the emergency departments all the time. Use it on kids. It's our go-to medicine for kids if they get a laceration in the face or whatnot. And given in a smaller dose than you would in an ER or an operating room, it becomes this dissociative psychedelic experience. It really just sort of warps the space-time continuum and just changes the way you see things. So that is, I think, a big part of how it can work for depression, PTSD, and other mental conditions.
Makes sense. So what would be, I guess, like a typical patient? Would it be somebody who was in the, served like in the military, or even like an adolescent, or I guess like, who would ketamine really work well for?
Yeah, so historically, I started the company because of the veteran suicide rate. I mean, I'm a veteran. That was the whole thing. A lot of times people ask, oh, do you just treat veterans? Well, no, not at all. Actually, veterans are unfortunately a very, very small number of our patient population. So we treat pretty much everybody. So the folks that it can potentially help, traditionally, ketamine has been thought of for treatment-resistant depression. So a lot of the initial studies that came out found that people who had failed every other therapy, would respond. I mean, it was like about a 70 or 80% success rate of getting ketamine and treating treatment-resistant depression. There've also been a number of studies coming out looking at its use for PTSD, anxiety. There's some studies about obsessive compulsive disorder. So a lot of our patients are folks who have been on antidepressants for a long time, been on different medications for a long time, and just haven't gotten the success that they want. That's a big group of them. People who just that other medications haven't worked. And then 2, we get a lot of people who have had a history of psychological trauma. So the thing with people, like if you see some horrific event or if you experience a number of horrific events over a sustained period, and you have this intense psychological injury, you basically are left, I think, with two existential questions. One is, why did that happen, and how do I move on from here? How do I get going from here? To me, it sort of stands to reason that, like, well, if we just give you some pill that's going to modulate your serotonin reuptake and change your chemistry a little bit, what does that do to actually answer those questions? So not very much. This is the bottom line. So a lot of our patients are people who are looking for that transpersonal, powerful experience, which which ketamine can certainly give when we get you to a high enough dose that we achieve that kind of a state.
So would it be like, are many of your patients folks that come in just one time for treatment, or do you have like returning patients that come in every week, or what does that process typically look like?
Yeah, the initial part of it is what we call the induction series, right? So it's a series of 6 sessions of intramuscular ketamine that are usually over about 3 weeks. And the fundamental thing to keep in mind is it's not like when you take penicillin for strep throat, right? If I prescribe you for 10 days of penicillin, you're taking it every day to just slowly beat down the bacteria and eventually kill it. This is more like a martial arts class and more like learning how to dance or whatnot. It's not so much the repetitive exposure to the medication, but the progressive increase in the dose and the experience. So what I mean by that is there is this point, I believe, where folks will have this transpersonal experience where they'll truly like kind of go through the looking glass and they'll see things differently. They see the strings and the puppets and whatnot. So, so let's say that dose is at maybe 120 milligrams, right? If I were to give you that on day one, it'd scare the hell out of you. I mean, that would be terrifying. You wouldn't know
Right.
what to do or what hit you. So the idea is we start you kind of slow and low, get the idea of it, we build you up, we progressively put you into this space where you have kind of that vision quest, and you finally have that breakthrough. And again, like part of why I use the analogy of like a martial arts class, right? I mean, if you went into some, Taekwondo or something like that on your first day, you said, I want to spar with a black belt. Let's just bring it on. Let's make it happen. Well, you're going to get your butt kicked, right? And you are not in any position to do that. So you have to start initially and get your yellow belt, your orange belt, progress to the point where you finally can perform on that level. So that's part of why we do this series of 6 to start with.
Makes sense. So in terms of, reaching more patients and really like getting this information, like what has been the best strategy for you to get in front of new people?
Well, thankfully, there've been a lot of factors beyond our control, right? But because I had moved down to San Antonio for several years, and so in 2015 is when I started the company. In retrospect, I'm not precisely sure what I was thinking at the start of a psychedelic medicine company in San Antonio, Texas. To say that there was a lot of negative reinforcement is a huge understatement. A lot of my colleagues at the time thought that I'm going to lose my license because at the time everyone knew that there can't be a benefit to altering one's state of consciousness, right? I mean, that's clear. Nancy Reagan made that very, very clear for us. All the ads about this is your brain on drugs and all this kind of stuff. I mean, it's we have been ingrained in this idea that altering your mind, unless it's alcohol, of course, is not cool. That's not good. So it was very challenging initially to get people on board. Slowly, though, over the years, the good thing is a lot of this is starting to take shape. I mean, a lot of other people, Joe Rogan's talking about it. NPR has run stories on this. Rolling Stone ran a story on ketamine. So there's more and more and more understanding that all we're doing is leveraging a non-ordinary state of consciousness. We're not having a party. We're not doing anything immoral. We're not talking to demons or anything like that. This is, it's just showing you things from a different perspective. So a lot of just the cultural shift has been helpful. And then besides that, I mean, we do the usual stuff about advertising on social media and blog posts and whatnot. We've published 3 articles of original research. So when we get some publicity for doing those kind of things, it gets us on people's radar screens.
Yeah, it makes sense. So in terms of goals, right? So you mentioned that you have several locations. Like what is on your vision board for next year? Are you planning on opening up more locations, or what are you really looking to do as you scale this company?
Yeah, so we are definitely looking to grow. We just reorganized in the last few months from being just a privately held medical company that was based in Texas to being a Delaware-based C Corp. We brought in some investors. We're bringing in a few more, and we've developed a board of directors. So we are looking for ways to scale this, right? When I first opened this clinic, I mean, on my vision board, I created this idea where I wanted to have a clinic outside of every major military installation in the country, and that's still my goal. I mean, it's going to take some money to do that. So, if any of your viewers have, a few million they want to invest, feel free to DM me, and we'll talk. But that's the goal, right? Because the thing is, there's a lot of people for which traditional therapies don't work, right? So, for instance, we want to open down in Colorado Springs, right? So there's a person, let's say there's some lady in Colorado Springs who in April of next spring is going to take her life, right? She doesn't have access to ketamine right now. She doesn't have access to seeing what it's about. She doesn't know anything about it. So if we can expand and open and get this out there, just the number of lives that can be saved is so exciting, right? I mean, so yeah. So I mean, as far as immediate goals, we're hoping first quarter of next year to open in Littleton, on the south side of Denver, for those of you who aren't familiar with the geography, and then hopefully expand to at least one or two other clinics in Colorado, and looking at some other states as well, but trying to figure out the kind of the political and other, the landscape before we jump to a third state.
Makes sense. So in terms of raising money, right, you mentioned that you're looking to raise money. So what would you use that money for? You're saying, which would it be to open up more locations, marketing campaigns, to inform more people about the benefit of it? Like what exactly would you, use those millions of dollars for?
Yeah, kind of all of the above. I mean, part of it is we're trying to make sure to have a really, really good system figured out to start with, right? A foundation for that. So, in the immediate raise would hopefully would help us open, like, maybe two or three more clinics. But there's other things, right? Like I said, we've published three research articles so far. We got another article that we just submitted looking at ketamine in police officers with PTSD. And so I really want to ramp up the research part of this because, again, there's a lot of skepticism out there. There's a lot of people who are like, man, does this work? I mean, is this just a bunch of voodoo stuff you're doing? So we want to show through research that it works. So, I mean, as far as what I do with funding, I mean, we definitely build our research arm dramatically, hire a full-time grant writer, et cetera, try going after NIH grants eventually. As far as, yeah, the marketing, getting more of that kind of stuff out there as well, getting in the word. It takes a lot of money to do that. So especially then if we want to jump to another state, because I mean, right now we're pretty well established in Texas and Colorado. But if we wanted to move to, just some other state, I mean, there's obviously a fair amount of capital required if you don't have a footprint in that state already.
Makes sense. So in order to make a location viable, like what are you looking at? I mean, in terms of like, revenue, right? So there's like a certain revenue number per location where you say, okay, like this is what, like the target is, like what actually has to make sense in order to make it work?
Yeah, there's a couple of components, right? I mean, because in the interesting thing is in Colorado, we've gone in network with Colorado Medicaid, which is interesting because most private insurance will not pay for it, will not pay for ketamine. They have a clause in their contract talking about they won't pay for experimental therapies. Medicaid it does not have that clause, and it's interestingly enough, they've been very cool to work with and whatever. We've even had patients referred from Colorado Medicaid, which is kind of weird. Even though we take a pretty good pay cut, right? I mean, the amount we make per patient with Medicaid is a lot less, but the fact that there's many more of them helps just through economy of scale can help support the clinic. Texas does not. The Texas Medicaid system is pretty much the exact opposite of Colorado. If you looked at like on a spectrum, right, of like, user friendly and patient centered and whatnot, Texas is pretty much the opposite of that. So we do not participate with Texas Medicaid. And unfortunately, we can't participate with any insurance companies in Texas right now because that's again been shut down by the insurance companies, not by us. So it depends. If we were to go into a different state, we are actually looking at, hey, would the Medicaid system in that state be viable? Is that something we can look at? Or do we have to go after people who can afford ketamine on a self-pay basis? And so that gets a little challenging. In addition to that, we're trying to get into some other networks where we can deal directly with employers as part of an EAP benefit. So recently got accepted into the Terramind group, which has been great. A great organization. Marcus Capone is a big part of that organization. So we're gonna be working with them. Hopefully, get some referrals from private companies. So yeah, that's kind of the thing is making that first decision. Like, will the Medicaid system support us? Yes or no, or is it all gonna be private pay? Then, of course, looking at the competition and what's all there, and trying to sort of figure out which states are going to be friendly to our business model. For instance, our clinics are largely run by nurse practitioners and PAs. So it's super beneficial to be in a state that has more progressive rules as far as nurse practitioners not needing a physician supervisor and be able to practice independently. Colorado is one of those states. Texas is not. So yes, I don't know, probably about 150 different things that sort of go into the equation.
Right, makes sense. So, in terms of like in the business right now, what would you say is the biggest challenge that you're facing?
The uncertainty with regards to the political landscape and third-party payers, right? So it's a fascinating juncture that we're in, where we have a treatment that has been shown to work in, let's say, 70% of patients with treatment-resistant depression, right? So if it can take somebody and not just decrease their desire to take their life, but it just takes it off the table. It makes taking your life something you're just like, dude, that's not even something I would think about doing, right? So, but the fact that it's not covered by government payers, third-party payers, is honestly a travesty, right? Because if a patient decides, hey, I want to take my life, I'm going to eat a bottle of Tylenol, or down a whole bottle of Tylenol, they're going to go to the ER. So I'm an ER doctor. So if I see that patient in the ER, that ER visit is going to be a critical care visit. I'm going to bill probably $10,000 just for our services in the ER. We'll admit them to the ICU, put them on a special drip that protects the liver to, prevent liver failure and whatever. That's going to be a 3, 4, 5 day stay in the ICU. That's $100,000 that instead the government could have paid us, let's say 3,000, to do a series of ketamine, and with some other integration sessions with our behavioral health specialists, and avoid that, right? So that's kind of the biggest challenge right now, is that we're still I guess there's some debate as to where we are on the product innovation curve, right? Are we on the early adopter still, or are we on the early majority? There have been some big companies, that have raised a ton of money and not done very well, who I think thought we were a little further along than we are. So I think, unfortunately, we probably are still kind of in the early adopter phase with psychedelics. So
Right, but I mean, I guess you guys have these locations. I mean, I'm assuming that they are profitable and they're doing decently well. So it's like, the business model you have now, it seems like it is working, right?
yeah. Yeah, it's working, because I mean there are still enough people who recognize what it can do, and realize that it can like change people's lives, right? So yeah, so it's just kind of funny that the someday, like, the number of clinics that offer ketamine will be just enormous, right? I mean, like, once the number, if you look at the number of people who realize that this could be beneficial, and other things too, like
Right,
psilocybin, MDMA, and what, it all falls under that same umbrella.
right,
If you look at a Venn diagram, the group that could benefit from it is this big. Right now, we still got, there's a lot of people in the United States. I mean, we still have a bunch of
right,
people paying to come see us, and that's great. But it's
right.
just, it's fun to. It'd be great to see someday when more people really realize, hey, this is not, it's not witchcraft. It's not crazy. This works.
Right. So when it comes to your business, like what is the role of high level technologies such as AI? Do you guys utilize it? And if not, what could be some of the use cases for it in the business?
AI, we're starting to use more in our marketing, as far as Chat GPT and some of the posts and that sort of thing, and whatnot, image creation. I think there could be a big role for AI in the whole process of the intake, right? Is bringing a patient in, because the concern that medical boards and other third party observers have, which is very legitimate, is, are people just calling us up to get high, right? Are they just saying, oh, we'll try ketamine? That sounds fun. I want to come and just, like, I know one critic said that ketamine clinics are the modern day opium dens and whatever, in his infinite wisdom. But, there's a grain of truth to what he says, right? So when a patient contacts us and we're trying to figure out, hey, are they appropriate? Well, the problem is there's some of our competitors who, if you call them first thing in the morning, they'll have you in a chair later that afternoon getting ketamine, which is not acceptable, right? I mean, because ketamine is in many ways super, super safe, but it's really important to do an adequate psychosocial evaluation on patients, make sure they don't have psychosis, make sure they have an adequate support network, try to figure out like where they're at, what it's all about. So I think AI is pretty exciting in the sense it's going to help us quite a bit with the whole process of screening through people, doing the intake a lot more effectively, a lot more efficiently. But yeah, so I'm pretty excited to see where it's going to go.
But do you view it like as like a chatbot feature on your website, or like where do you see it like coming into play?
There's a few things, and one, and not that I'm any expert on AI, right? So I
Right.
mean,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
anyone wants to make a comment on this video, and please just say, hey, you know what, you never thought of this. Like,
yeah,
look at
yeah.
AI. such and such. Great. I mean, I think there could be all sorts of things as far as on the back end, as far as error control, error mitigation, pharmaceutical safety and whatnot, that I think AI could play a role. I mean, we've implemented, I was a flight surgeon in the Army, so like we implemented this whole idea of crew resource management, the idea there's no rank at the cockpit and, double checks with all the medications and whatever. But I think technology and AI can play a big role in really helping to ensure that safe. Like I said, the screening process to bring people in. There's also it's a journey, right? As I said, when you start with us and you do the series of 6, you then end up doing some maintenance sessions for every month or two, you might come back for another session, what, and who you are is changing in that process. So I think there could be a role for like, putting out information or interacting with our patients to better inform them, like as to what they need and what they should be working on. Like, for instance, after they're 6, hey, let's start having to really focus on you doing your journaling, your positive affirmations, et cetera, et cetera. And then then AI sort of figuring out like, hey, you know what, have you gone to an art museum recently? Because, trying to activate the right hemisphere and all this kind of stuff. So I think there'll be some roles for that. Like I say, there's people out there who know AI way better than I do. So if you got any, so feel free to let me know.
Makes sense. Yeah, I was just curious. So in terms of, your business, what would you say is the one biggest piece of advice that you wish you knew before you started this company?
Oh man, as a business owner, you have to. Unfortunately, you kind of have to know a little bit about everything, right? You really every time I have tried to like outsource something to an expert, quote unquote expert, I've gotten burned. I've gotten burned real badly. Especially marketing. Right? It really does not take much at all for somebody to watch a bunch of YouTube videos and start learning a bunch of 3-letter acronyms like click-through rate and blah, 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 and all that sort of stuff. And they can sound like they know what they're talking about. There's a
Right.
tremendous amount of people in business who sound like they know what they're talking about. But all I've done is
Right.
watch YouTube videos and they put themselves. I was watching a Gary Vaynerchuk video last night where he was giving a lecture and he was making a comment about how he said, yeah, I've been watching some of your all's profiles. And in the last 9 months, I've seen you change what you're an expert at several times.
Right.
Right. And his point was like, why don't you actually find something and become an expert at it instead of saying like marketing expert, then like HR expert? Like, it's crap. And that's the thing that I sort of have discovered. There's a lot of fools in business, a lot
Right.
of people who can help you make it big and like, oh, I know this, that. And we hired a marketing director one time who totally pulled the wool over our eyes. And I asked him like, hey, can you upload something to Facebook? And I don't have time to do it myself. And the long story short, it came out that he doesn't know how. He wants marketing director. He does not know how to upload something to Facebook.
That's
I'm like,
crazy.
oh, man. So like, so I guess unfortunately you have to kind of do that,
So
right?
I guess like as of now, like so like you learn right about like these marketing people. So like do you do like all your own marketing or like how did you I guess like essentially like find a way because you mentioned that you're running ads like how you like I guess now like what have you like what is your strategy from that
Oh,
standpoint?
yeah, no, I mean, now we've got some great internal people. We have our social media director named Melissa. We got Shane's our back end electronic guy who knows the website stuff and all the Google marketing and whatnot. Really, we finally have found folks that I think are good. The thing is, I have to personally learn enough that when I'm interviewing them and talking to them, I can call BS
Right,
and
right,
know where they're at. I need to know Google Analytics well enough to be able to say, hey man, like what you're doing is not getting us results, or it is getting us results. So,
right,
so
right,
that's been great. We've also in-housed it. We just have had horrible luck outsourcing marketing to big companies
right.
because they're very good at putting together flashy PowerPoints every month and say, oh, you've had this many bots come and check your website, or actually not bots, sorry, this many like original leads. And, it's like, come on. So I've had to learn that, and that's been good. Now that I feel like I know that kind of stuff. We have a CEO named Mike Myers who is incredible. I mean, the dude is like, turned around multiple companies and sold them and whatever. So like he clearly knows the business side of things really, really well,
Right,
which
right.
which I'm okay at, but not honestly. I mean, I know some of my staff watching this might laugh right now, but I'm a lot better at being a doctor and doing some of the fun creative stuff than looking at spreadsheets. So we finally got a good team, I think, that does know what they're doing.
That's awesome. So if we're going to have this conversation again in 1 year from now, where do you see things going for the business?
I see us being larger. I'm hoping a year from now we'll have at least two more, if not three more clinics. We're going to be working on rolling out a substance abuse treatment pathway. That's going to be awesome. I think ketamine and other psychedelics have a huge role to play. I mean, you probably see some of the news articles on what ibogaine and whatnot can do for substance abuse. I think ketamine plays a huge role in that. So I'm hoping that that'll be further along. I'm also just hoping there'll be a lot more understanding of with organizations to set up contracts. Like, for instance, right now we're running a whole series of police officers through and treating them, and we're going to be publishing that study in the next few months. My hope is we can get the local departments to understand that, hey, make this a benefit, right? If you got a cop out there with a gun who's in a bad space mentally, that's not good for that person, and it's really, really not good for society, right? I mean, I as a taxpayer want my local police to be in a good headspace, because I mean, we've all seen what happens when things kind of go south with
Correct.
interactions. So yeah, I'm hoping by a year from now we'll have more contracts with actual companies, bypass the whole insurance process, have a larger organization, and hoping to have several more papers and more research turned out by then. We're going to be doing, like I said, the police officer stuff that we're working on. We're also going to be doing some a research paper looking at actually sexual function and whatnot, as how it was affected by your ketamine treatment, with the hypothesis being that if you're in a better state, then you're in a much better place with regards to that. And that's a huge part of the human existence and whatnot. So it's going to be and that would be kind of a fun.
That's
It's
awesome.
fun for our social media people to come out with the post saying what we publish there. But so stay tuned.
No, no, it's cool. So if somebody watching this wanted to reach out, do you mind sharing your company website and social media handle, just best way to find you?
Yeah. Well, our website is clarisana.com, Klarisana.com. And but we're also on YouTube and Instagram. We're not on TikTok actually, but yeah. So, and you can also reach out to me personally I'm on Instagram. I've got both the Carl Bonnett, and then I'm also a little side project I do called Deep Sea Diver, which is sort of this fun discussion of other things that surround psychedelics and the idea of changing your paradigm. So I'm
Awesome. Well,
out there.
Carl,
Feel free to find
thank
us.
you. Sounds great. Well, Carl, thank you so much for your time today. It was a pleasure, and we're rooting for you guys.
Yeah, thanks so much. Appreciate your time too.
Thanks. All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.